The rivers of California once teemed with fish, but their numbers have drastically declined, largely due to a lack of cool, clear water. In a time of ever-increasing demands on our natural resources, climate change, and disappearing species, sustainable farming practices will help mitigate this loss. Fish-friendly farming is one of the most successful programs in the United States at bringing together the interests of farmers, regulators, and our precious wild fisheries. To date, the independent, nonprofit Fish-Friendly Farming has certified over 128,000 acres and 142 wineries, mostly in the heart of California's finest wine country, in Mendocino, Sonoma, and Napa counties.
Chateau Montelena was founded in 1882 by Senator Alfred Tubbs, and we're perhaps most known well for our 1973 Chardonnay, which bested the top Burgundies in 1976 at the Judgment of Paris, where some of the finest French enologists picked our wine blind as the best Chardonnay in the world. And today we still continue that tradition of making only the finest wines in a classical style with California flavor. So Chateau Montelena currently farms 5 ranches here in the valley, and we're standing here right now on the Chateau Montelena estate vineyard, which we've been farming for about a little over 40 years now. From the beginning, we've really strived to be good stewards of the land. Part of that is focusing on sustainability. We look at what are we doing really well, what do we need work on. Laurel and her team at the California Land Stewardship Institute, through fish-friendly farming, bring the scientific expertise to help us make those decisions, to do that assessment. And above all, we've looked at this relationship as a partnership. Luckily for us, we didn't really have any major, glaring problems. Instead, it was more, modifying how we've done things just based on new information. And in assessing the property and going through the certification process, we were able to identify a few spots in the Napa River, which runs along the southwest corner of our property, that have seen some scouring due to intermittent water releases from Kimball Canyon Reservoir and just the natural process of how a river flows. And so working with Laurel's team, we identified the problem areas and we looked at what would be a real win-win, not only for the winery, but also for the river.
I'm with NOAA's National Marine Fisheries Service. NOAA is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. We're charged with protecting the nation's living marine resources, which includes salmon and steelhead. And that's 2 of the species that we have in this river, and they're on the endangered species list as threatened with extinction. But what we're faced with here is we're faced with a stretch of the river that needs to have some stabilization put on it. We like that to happen mostly through the use of large deep-rooted trees such as oaks, and that will control the fine sediment that goes in the river. And the fine sediment will choke, if there's too much, the fine sediment will choke out salmon reds. It causes turbidity, which makes it difficult for salmon to see and find their prey items, etc. The National Marine Fisheries Service has few regulatory options in dealing with private landowners. Laurel and her group putting together this sort of program has provided us a real opportunity to find those areas that'll help lead to recovery.
When confronted with the alphabet soup of government regulation, as a rancher, it can inspire a fair amount of fear and trepidation. And frankly, most of us don't have the expertise to deal with it. And so working with the fish-friendly farming program really allowed us to dig deep into what's most important. The benefits are tremendous, not only from a quality standpoint and environmental quality standpoint, but also in mitigating risks that may come down the pipe, whether they're from Sacramento or Washington at some point in the future.
When we first started the fish-friendly farming program, we met with a number of growers and different agencies. It was in Sonoma and Mendocino counties. And the thing that we found out from the grape growers was that their biggest concern was the number of different types of environmental regulations that they had to comply with. So this would include Clean Water Act, the Endangered Species Act, there was the Fish and Game Code, there's the Water Code, there's the pesticide regulations, and then there's also, in some instances, local regulations. So what we did with fish-friendly farming is we wrote a workbook of best management practices that incorporated all of those different laws. So an individual grower doesn't have to try to go through 9 different processes to be fully compliant. They can just go through our process and be fully compliant. We're standing in the floodplain of Myakama Creek on the landslide vineyard property of Simi Winery. This was the site, one of the first 5 sites that we certified back in 1999. And one of the big focuses of the farm plan is conserving and improving the riparian corridor of the creek.
One of the primary ways that we have increased the health of this river corridor is through revegetation. I think there were 7 to 10 zones in here that we did over a period of years in conjunction with fish-friendly farming, Circuit Riders at the time, which is now the Center for Social and Environmental Stewardship. And the partnership was very fruitful, as you can see the health of the corridor behind us. Myakama is a very important creek in the Russian River watershed. It is a steelhead-bearing stream, primarily. One of the things that the fish-friendly farming program has allowed us to do is get a second generation of trees growing up. We had a really old generation of trees, and the new development of the secondary trees was being stifled by invasive species. So by doing the riparian restoration that we did, we've allowed for an entire second generation of trees to be spouted behind the older ones. That keeps the water shaded and cooler, which is vital in the rearing and spawning of steelhead and other salmonids. We're looking at vinca, which is an extremely invasive species. It is a host for Pierce's disease, and the blue-green sharpshooters can transfer that into the grapevines. So that's a negative from a farming perspective, but also it is a smothering invasive species that does not allow native species of plants and healthy riparian corridor plants to develop to their fullest or to regenerate. It's very important to have a management program that is continuously dealing with the outbreak of vinca. It's a very invasive species that's difficult to deal with. So we're about 100 feet above the creek in elevation right now, and this is where the water goes into the watershed that then falls down to the creek. One of the keys here is all of this rock formation you see here. Underneath the cover crop, there is a significant amount of rocks. And what happens here is all of the sediment that comes from the surrounding ranches and is leaving the watershed, this is a place where that all collects. And it's the last place before it falls down the watershed and then goes into the creek. This is a key element because it's another place where sediment is caught before it leaves this part of the ranch. Then it goes into another place where it gets filtered again before the clear, clean water hits Myakama Creek. And that is one of the big elements with fish-friendly farming, is making sure that the cleanest, most pure water possible that is leaving your property is hitting the creek.
Our vineyards here at Clos du Bois, we use between 1/3 of an acre-foot of water and 80% of an acre-foot of water in order to produce our crops. And it depends on the type of soil that they're in. It depends on the type of rootstock. Depends on the variety that's being grown. And it depends on the season they're being grown in. We have very diverse soils across our vineyards, and in order to manage the irrigation of those soils, we have installed a system of dual drip lines. So we have 2 hoses out here in the field. They're controlled, each controlled separately by a valve on where the main pipes come in, and one system, one hose is set up to irrigate every vine in the block. So we can do fertigation, we can do an irrigation across the whole block. And then later in the summer, when the soil moisture changes a little bit and areas of high sand content are a little bit require a little bit more care and a little bit more water, this second drip hose comes into play, where we can just irrigate those weak areas of the vineyard. This is a soil moisture reader that we use in our vineyards. We've got probably 40 different sites scattered around all of our vineyards, and we stick this down a PVC pipe, and it takes readings, and those readings are downloaded and saved in here, and they're eventually go back. This is Ricky Mendoza, he's our VIT tech, and they eventually go back and end up on a computer program, and then it's one of the tools we use to determine how we want to irrigate, when we want to irrigate, and how long we want to irrigate. This is the edge of our vineyard here, and you can see behind me a demonstration of a filter strip and what that looks like. And when it rains and water is running out of the vineyard, which is only in this particular instance in very catastrophic rain events, the grass filter strip along the swale over there and the grass filter strip out here on the edge filter the fine sediment out of the water, and it makes for cleaner water going into the ephemeral waterway that's located right over there, and cleaner water that goes into the Russian River, which is located about a half a mile behind us here. So this is a weather station behind us, kind of in the lowest part of our 450 acres that is on this ranch, and we use this for several different things. It measures rainfall, it measures relative humidity, it measures ambient temperature, it measures wind direction and speed, and we use all of those things to help us determine during cold nights when we need to turn on our frost system, our irrigation system, sprinkler systems for frost control.
As part of each fish-friendly farming plan, we look at all the uses of water on a particular property and where there can be additional savings. We also look at the total amount of water used per acre each year and make sure that it's within a pretty consistent range and is the lowest amount possible.
So out here is another example of how we prepare the vineyard for frost events and preserve our cover crops that you can see. Every other row has been tilled or disked, and we do that to create a surface that's actually absorbing heat from the sun and will carry that heat further into the night than this 12-inch tall grass that you see on the row next to it. But we like our cover crops too, because our cover crops help us provide that filter strip that we talked about a little bit earlier. They also help water penetration down into the soil. They also provide another environment for beneficial insects to live in that will help us with insect control. And so this is one of the ways that we help ourselves minimize the impact of cold weather and frost. It might get us over the hump on a borderline cold night, and so this is one of the things we do to help. And then we don't have to turn on our sprinkler systems.
One of the most important parts of the fish-friendly farming program is the certification. When we first started the program in 1997, we did focus groups with consumers and people from the community and asked them questions about what types of certifications they believed in or had faith in. And we found that self-certifications and certifications done by the industry were largely not accepted by the public. So we decided that we needed to have an objective third-party certification process. So what we developed was a process where our organization puts together the farm plan, works with the farmer, has all the little details written down, ready to be reviewed, and then we have government agencies that come in and review the plan and look around at the property to make sure that the plan is accurate and that it has identified all of the things that need to be done, all the BMPs, and puts a timeline to those BMPs. And BMPs are best management practices.
The value for us is multi-directional. We're working with our regulators and creating a dialogue. This is an environmental sustainability program that will meet our needs, because as farmers, we're out here, this is what we do. We're first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth generation, and we want to protect the soil. We want to continue this way of life. We want to produce great wines.
This is La Ribera Vineyards. It's about 140 acres along the Russian River, and it's been in production since the mid-60s. And its primary water source is the Russian River, and it had always been a direct diverting system where we were pumping directly from the river to the vineyard. When it comes to frost protection, we need to pump a considerable amount of water because we have to cover the entire vineyard at one time. And if you put us together with everybody else that's along the river, and we're all doing that at the same time when there's a frost, you get a significant draw down on the river. And when the river is running low, like it was in 2008, and the frost was extreme, there was a pretty big pull on the river to the point where it started to impair the flow that is necessary for maintaining the fishery. That created a situation where we had to look at alternatives. And the best alternative in that type of situation is to have off-stream storage that can be filled when flows are higher, or filled at a much slower rate. And then during frost, you're pumping simply from the ponds and not having any effect on the river whatsoever. Those are expensive operations to do. A pond is not a cheap thing to build. So there was a grant called AWEP that was acquired through the efforts of Fish Friendly Farming and some other organizations, and they provided funding for about 50% of the cost of putting in these ponds. So this pond went in at that time. This is a 50-acre-foot pond that used to be Sauvignon Blanc. It has provided us the ability to frost protect without taking any water at that time from the river, and to refill it where initially when we were running our frost, we were running maybe about 13 CFS draw on the river. Refilling this pond is done at a rate of 3 CFS, so that has a much smaller effect on the flows in the river, and it doesn't happen at the same time that everyone else is pumping. We can get frosts that are down at 26, 27 degrees where a wind machine would not be adequate. We were more concerned about being able to maintain more of a habitat for the ducks and geese and frogs and whatever else normally lives around a natural pond. And we also wanted the scenic aspects of not having this fence go all the way around it. And that has made the pond a lot more beneficial as not just a water storage container, but for the life that thrives on ponds. So this is where we used to take the water from the river. It's a rather substantial setup. It would be powered by 2 large diesel motors, and it would move about 6,000 gallons a minute from the river out into the vineyard for frost protection. You can see those large hammerhead ends or fish screens, and it was quite a project. Each year we'd have to try and get those things down into the river and hope that the river bottom hadn't changed, and then you have to pull them out in the fall. Ponds are a lot easier to manage than the river, and this has been a real asset. It saves us time, it saves us money, it saves us headaches.
We're standing in an area that was logged hastily in the 1950s during the building boom. They built a number of roads very quickly just to be able to get into the forest, and the result of that was a great deal of erosion, side cuts that eroded down, created a lot of sedimentation in our rivers. We were able to come in here through our federal grants and through the Fish Friendly Farming program to establish and have funding to put in a lot of new culverts and rolling dips and be able to try and carry any soil or any water across the road and down with very little sedimentation occurring. Sometimes you just have to have a culvert placed because there's no other options. In that case, it's important that the culvert not be angled too steeply, and also that at the outflow that there's a place with dirt or rock or something to slow it down, to catch any soil that's coming down and have the water disperse evenly in a fan-like area. And here we have another project that we did in conjunction with our Fish Friendly Farming certification. Prior to this reconstruction, there was a logging road that was sitting about 40 feet above my head. And there was an old culvert that splashed about 35 feet down into the stream bed, causing erosion on the other side and really blocking the possibility of any fish migrating up into the stream. With funding, we were able to excavate, remove old fir trees that have been placed down in the stream bed, and then remove the old culvert, and then we placed the culvert down right on the bedrock, and that allowed all of the stream to continue a natural stream bed through the other side of this roadway above us. So another strategy was to come in with a good rock base and really seal the road. That made the road drivable year-round. This is our frost machine that we just installed this winter. It's a wind machine that will take warm air from the higher elevation and bring that warmer air down towards the ground. It's an important water-saving device for us because during traditional frost protection, at least in this vineyard, where we're spraying water out at 55 gallons per minute per acre, this can save a tremendous amount of water that we can then save for later in the season for irrigation, and we won't have to collect quite so much water during the winter. We entered into this relationship thinking that we were just going to improve the water, but of course all of our ecosystems on the ranch are interconnected. It's a big improvement for us, and it's really helped lower our farming costs and our farming losses. Working with fish-friendly farming helped us navigate the often difficult to understand regulations coming from state water resources and national marine fisheries. And they've been a great partner also in helping us formulate ideas and execute plans to obtain funding from the federal government and from the state government in making these programs really come to life.
The growers who participate in fish-friendly farming certification want to do the right thing for the environment while proudly and quietly making some of the world's finest wines. Fish-friendly farming has been so successful that it is expanding into new areas of the Sierra foothills and to rangelands. This is an example of environmental stewardship that can be an inspiration for others in the United States and beyond.